I'm Stephanie, 35, and I never expected to spend Christmas staring at a text from my mother that said, "We all agreed you're not welcome at Christmas this year." My hands trembled as I read it, thinking about Madison, my 8-year-old daughter, who'd been talking about seeing her grandparents for months. Little did my family know that as their financial advisor, who managed my father's construction business accounts, I was about to freeze every dollar they had access to. After years of lending them money they never repaid while being treated like an outsider, this would be the Christmas they finally learned what consequences felt like. I know you're probably watching this video from somewhere cozy, maybe even preparing for your own family gatherings. If you've ever felt like the black sheep in your family, this story might resonate with you. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you want more stories about family karma. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this one unfolds. To understand why I took such drastic action, you need to understand my family. Despite being the one who kept our family finances afloat, I was always treated like an outsider. Being a divorced single mom to Madison only seemed to cement my status as the family disappointment. My career as a financial advisor wasn't an accident. I've always been good with numbers, and when my father Richard's construction business started struggling 10 years ago, I stepped in. I created a complex account structure, managed his taxes, and turned his chaotic bookkeeping into a streamlined system that ultimately saved his business. What started as helping Dad became a professional arrangement with me, serving as his official financial manager while maintaining my own client list. The family hierarchy was clear from early on. My younger brother Ethan was the golden child. 4 years my junior, he could do no wrong in our father's eyes, despite his spotty employment history and tendency to ask for loans he never repaid. My mother died when I was 15, and Dad remarried Barbara within a year. Barbara never missed an opportunity to remind me I wasn't her daughter in subtle ways that always gave her plausible deniability. What I didn't realize was how much money I had been leaving on the table by charging him a nominal fee for services that would have cost thousands monthly from another advisor. I justified it as family helping family. But as I would soon discover, that sentiment only seemed to flow in one direction. Still, I maintained my professional relationship with Dad's business. It was, after all, my field of expertise, and I told myself I was building something that could one day help Madison. Plus, I genuinely wanted to help my father succeed. Despite everything, he was still my dad. There was always an excuse for why my achievements were downplayed, while Ethan's minor successes were celebrated. When I was promoted to senior financial advisor at my firm, it barely warranted a mention at family dinner. When Ethan landed a sales job after 6 months of unemployment, Barbara threw a party. When I won a regional award for financial planning, my father said, "That's nice, sweetie," before changing the subject. When Ethan closed his first big sale, Dad bought him a Rolex. The pattern was clear, but I kept hoping for acceptance. When Madison was born, I thought things would change. A grandchild would bring us closer, I reasoned. Barbara cooed over her when others were around, but would forget to invite us to family events. "Oh, we didn't think you'd want to bring Madison all this way," she'd say, despite the fact that I had explicitly mentioned bringing her. Madison and I had been planning our Christmas visit for months. She'd carefully selected presents for everyone, including a handmade bracelet for Barbara that took her weeks to string together during craft time. I'd spent more than I should have on gifts too, including a rare collectible watch for my father and premium golf clubs for Ethan, who had recently taken up the sport. Every time I confronted these disparities, I was made to feel overreactive, too sensitive, or simply mistaken. "That's not what happened," or "You're remembering it wrong," became common refrains. For 20 years, Barbara had been the gatekeeper of family dynamics, and she'd systematically ensured I remained on the outside. 3 weeks before Christmas, the first hint of trouble came during a phone call with Barbara. She called to ask about some tax documents, which wasn't unusual, but her tone shifted when I mentioned our Christmas plans. During the pandemic, when construction was hit hard, I worked unpaid extra hours restructuring Dad's business to keep it afloat. I refinanced my own house to loan him $30,000 to cover payroll. Meanwhile, Barbara redecorated their vacation cabin, and Ethan got a new truck courtesy of Dad's business accounts that I managed but wasn't supposed to notice. "What does that mean?" I asked, already feeling my stomach knot. "Well, you know how it is. The house gets so crowded, and Ethan's bringing his new girlfriend, Natalie. We want to make her feel welcome." I'd never met Natalie. In fact, I hadn't even heard about her until that moment. But I already knew she would be welcomed with open arms in a way I never had been. "We're still coming," I said firmly. "Madison's been looking forward to it for months. I've already bought all the presents." Of course, Barbara backpedaled. Just thinking out loud. 2 days later, I overheard a conversation between Barbara and Ethan when I stopped by to drop off some business documents for my father. They didn't know I was there. "Stephanie always makes these events about her," Barbara was saying. "Christmas should be about family." "I know," Ethan replied. "But Dad will never agree to uninvite her." "Leave your father to me," Barbara said. "Natalie deserves a proper first Christmas with us, not with Stephanie judging everyone." I stood frozen in the hallway, documents clutched to my chest. The familiar feeling of being an outsider in my own family washed over me, but this time there was something different. This time they were actively plotting to exclude me, not just emotionally, but physically. At Thanksgiving, I met Natalie for the first time. She was pretty bubbly and clearly nervous about meeting everyone. Barbara embraced her immediately, giving her the warmest welcome I'd ever seen her extend to anyone. Throughout dinner, Barbara kept finding ways to mention how Natalie was just like family already. My father beamed, clearly taken with her as well. Meanwhile, I sat with Madison, noticing how no one asked about our lives or plans. When Madison tried to tell her grandfather about winning her school spelling bee, Barbara interrupted with a story about Ethan's childhood achievements. I watched my daughter's face fall, and something hardened inside me. Later, I overheard Barbara telling Natalie about Christmas plans, describing traditions I'd never been included in, and making promises about the whole family being together. When she caught me listening, she gave me a cold smile and said, "Of course, everyone who's really family will be there." That night, after Madison was asleep in the guest room, I confronted my father in his study. "Dad, I need to talk to you about how Barbara treats me and Madison." He sighed, not looking up from his paperwork. "Stephanie, not this again. Barbara loves you in her own way." "No, she doesn't. And now she's talking about excluding us from Christmas." "Don't be ridiculous. Nobody's excluding anyone." His dismissive tone was familiar. He'd been using it for years whenever I tried to address Barbara's behavior. "You never stand up for me," I said, my voice breaking. "You never have." He finally looked at me, his expression a mixture of weariness and irritation. "You're a grown woman, Stephanie. Stop looking for problems where there aren't any." That was the last real conversation I had with my father before everything fell apart. Over the next few weeks, I noticed that my calls went straight to voicemail. Texts were answered with one-word replies. Even emails about business matters received delayed cursory responses. Through a business connection, I discovered something else troubling. Natalie apparently owned a small boutique that was failing. My father had recently transferred $50,000 from the business account to his personal account. When I asked about it, citing tax implications, he brushed me off with a vague explanation about personal investments. It didn't take much detective work to discover that Ethan and Natalie had received that money to save her business. Money from the very accounts I managed moved without consulting me, the financial advisor. Money that would likely never be repaid, while my own $30,000 loan during the pandemic remained outstanding. The pieces were falling into place. I was valuable for my financial expertise and occasional cash infusions, but not valuable enough to be treated like actual family. And now with Natalie in the picture, it seemed I wasn't needed at all. The message came on a Tuesday morning while I was at work. I was between client meetings, checking emails when my phone buzzed. A text from Barbara in the family group chat. Richard, Ethan, Natalie and I have discussed it, and we all agreed you're not welcome at Christmas this year. It's better for everyone this way. We'll arrange to see Madison another time. My hands began shaking so badly I had to put the phone down on my desk. My heart raced, and I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. 20 years of slights and exclusions culminated in 16 words that confirmed my worst fears. I wasn't family. I never had been. I tried calling my father immediately, straight to voicemail. I called Ethan, same result. I even tried Barbara, but of course she didn't answer. They had delivered their verdict and weren't interested in discussion. The hardest part was telling Madison that evening. Her little face crumpled when I explained we wouldn't be going to Grandpa's house for Christmas. But why, Mommy, did I do something wrong? Grandpa promised to show me his train set. No, sweetheart, I said, holding back tears. You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes adults have disagreements. Can't you just say sorry? She asked with the simple logic of an 8-year-old. It's not that simple, honey. How could I explain to her that her mother had been deemed unworthy of family inclusion? That her grandmother and uncle had decided she wasn't welcome either? That night, after putting Madison to bed, I discovered something else. Barbara had posted photos on social media of Christmas decorations, with the caption, "Getting ready for our perfect family Christmas. So blessed to have Natalie joining our traditions this year." There were dozens of comments, including one from my father saying, "Can't wait to have everyone who matters under one roof." Everyone who matters. The words stung like a physical slap. Scrolling back through older messages, I discovered texts between Barbara and my father from weeks earlier, plotting how to tell me I wasn't welcome. Barbara had suggested doing it last minute so she can't make a fuss, but my father had said, "Let's give her some notice at least." Such generosity. I couldn't sleep that night. I paced my house, replaying years of mistreatment and unappreciated support in my mind. I thought about the business accounts I managed, the thousands of dollars I'd saved them in fees, the personal loans never repaid, the countless hours of unpaid work. In the morning, exhausted but clear-headed, I called Ashley, a trusted colleague at my firm. "I need some ethical advice." I began explaining the situation in professional terms. Ashley listened carefully before responding. "Professionally speaking, if you have reason to believe business funds are being misappropriated, you have not just the right but the obligation to protect those assets. As for the personal side," she paused. "I'm so sorry they're treating you this way, Stephanie. You deserve better." That conversation was the tipping point. I'd spent my entire adult life hoping for acceptance from people who saw me as nothing more than a convenient financial resource. I had the power to show them exactly what my role in their lives meant, and it was time to use it. I wasn't going to do anything illegal or unethical. I wasn't going to steal their money. But I was going to make sure they understood what they were losing by cutting me out. And I was going to do it by the book, using the very authority they had given me. Most people don't realize how complex small business finances can be, especially in construction, where cash flow is irregular and tax implications significant. Over the years, I'd built an intricate but efficient system for my father's business that balanced legal tax advantages with practical accessibility. As the official financial manager, I had authorized access to all business accounts. My name was on the paperwork, my credentials were used for banking access, and my professional reputation was tied to the management of these funds. This wasn't just family helping family. This was a professional arrangement, albeit one where I charged minimal fees out of familial loyalty. That morning, I began a thorough audit of all accounts I managed. What I found confirmed my suspicions, and worse. Beyond the $50,000 transfer to Ethan and Natalie, there was a pattern of Barbara and my father using business accounts for personal expenses without proper documentation. Meals that weren't business-related, travel expenses for vacations, tagged as business trips, and personal items purchased through company credit cards. If you've ever worked in finance or accounting, you know what a nightmare this kind of commingling of funds can be. It's not just messy, it can have serious tax implications and potentially trigger audits. As the financial manager of record, I could potentially be held professionally responsible for these irregularities. I've spent years building my career and reputation. I couldn't let their carelessness jeopardize that, especially now that I knew how little they valued me. What troubled me most was discovering that my father had recently inquired about changing account access protocols. A call to my contact at the bank confirmed my fear. He had been asking about removing me as an authorized manager, though he hadn't yet filed the paperwork. The timing suggested he planned to do it after the holidays, once they'd officially cut me from the family circle. I dug deeper and found evidence that Barbara had been making small unauthorized transfers from business accounts to personal accounts for years, always just under the threshold that would trigger automatic notifications to me. Accumulated over time, these transfers totaled over $40,000, more than the loan I'd made during the pandemic that they still hadn't repaid. Even more concerning were the planned Christmas expenditures. They had earmarked over $15,000 from business funds for end-of-year client appreciation, but cross-referencing with the actual client list showed no events planned. Instead, I found evidence of reservations at exclusive restaurants, high-end shopping trips, and a weekend getaway scheduled for after Christmas. Just for my father, Barbara, Ethan, and Natalie. The more I investigated, the clearer the picture became. They had been using me for my financial expertise while systematically excluding me emotionally. And now that they had Natalie, whom they seemed to have welcomed with open arms despite her financial troubles, they didn't even need me for the family appearance anymore. I called Ashley again to discuss my findings and my plan. "Everything you're describing is within your professional authority," she confirmed after hearing the details. "As the financial manager, you have not only the right but the responsibility to protect the business from financial mismanagement. Just make sure you document everything meticulously." "I have been," I assured her. "Every transaction, every irregularity, every unauthorized transfer. It's all documented." "Then from a professional standpoint, you're on solid ground. From a personal standpoint," she hesitated. "Are you prepared for the fallout? This will likely end your relationship with your father's business and possibly with your family." I thought about the text message. About 20 years of exclusion. About Madison's disappointed face when I told her we wouldn't see her grandfather for Christmas. "What relationship?" I replied. "They've made it clear where I stand. I'm just making sure I protect myself professionally before they try to scapegoat me for their financial mismanagement." Before implementing my plan, I needed to be absolutely certain I was acting within my legal and ethical rights. I knew I was, but I wanted to be beyond reproach. So I prepared a detailed financial report documenting all the irregularities, unauthorized transactions, and misuse of business funds. This wasn't about revenge, this was about professional responsibility and self-protection. You know, I never thought my professional skills would be what finally gave me leverage in my family situation. If you're watching this and feeling powerless in your own family dynamics, remember that sometimes our greatest strength comes from the skills we've built outside those relationships. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments. Have you ever had to use professional boundaries with family? Don't forget to hit like if this resonates with you, and let's continue this family finance story. With my documentation complete and my resolve firm, I began the process of securing the accounts. I didn't do anything dramatic like emptying the accounts or changing passwords. Instead, I implemented the security protocols that I had established years ago but that had never been activated. First, I initiated the two-factor authentication that required my approval for any transaction over $1,000. Then I flagged all accounts for potential irregular activity, which automatically triggered a 72-hour review period for any new transactions. Finally, I formalized the separation between business and personal finances by freezing any account that showed evidence of commingling funds until proper documentation could be provided. These were all legitimate financial security measures that I had recommended years ago, but that my father had deemed too complicated and unnecessary. Now they were very necessary indeed. The system automatically sent notification emails to all account holders, explaining that due to detected irregularities, enhanced security protocols had been implemented. I also included a link to the detailed report I had prepared, documenting every questionable transaction. Within 20 minutes of the emails going out, my phone began buzzing incessantly. First text messages, then calls. I let them all go to voicemail, focusing instead on ensuring that all documentation was properly backed up and secured. I made copies of everything and sent encrypted versions to my professional email and to Ashley as backup. One crucial step was ensuring that the regular business operations wouldn't be affected. I didn't want employees to miss their paychecks because of family drama. So, I specifically approved the upcoming payroll run and set up automatic approval for regular vendor payments, all documented with proper business justification. As the calls and messages continued to flood in, I contacted the bank manager directly to confirm that all my actions were within my authority as the account manager of record. She confirmed that they were, and noted that the irregularities I had documented would have eventually triggered the bank's own security protocols. "You're actually saving them from potential bigger issues down the line," she told me. Commingling business and personal funds like this is a red flag for auditors. That conversation reinforced my confidence that I was doing the right thing professionally regardless of the personal implications. By mid-afternoon, the tone of the messages changed, from demands to threats, then to desperate pleas. Barbara's voicemail was particularly vicious. "How dare you pull a stunt like this," she hissed. "After everything we've done for you, your father is furious. You'll never work in this town again when he's through with you." The irony of her claiming they had done anything for me wasn't lost on me. And the threat about my career only confirmed that they saw me as nothing more than a financial resource. Ethan's messages were less threatening but equally demanding. "Whatever point you're trying to make, this isn't the way. Dad needs access to those accounts now. Fix this." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I called my attorney to ensure that all my actions were legally sound. He confirmed they were provided I maintained proper documentation and didn't actually remove any funds. "You're not taking anything," he clarified. "You're implementing security measures that are within your authority as the financial manager. Just make sure you continue to act in the business's best interest, not out of personal animosity." "The protection of these accounts is in the business's best interest," I assured him. "And I have the documentation to prove it." With the legal bases covered, I turned my attention to Madison. I couldn't let family drama ruin her Christmas. So while the notifications continued to flood my phone, I made reservations for a special Christmas getaway just for the two of us. A mountain cabin with snow activities which she had always wanted to experience. It would be different from our usual Christmas, but maybe it was time for new traditions anyway. Just before dinner, my father finally called directly. After 3 ignored calls from Barbara and 2 from Ethan, he had apparently decided to handle the situation himself. I took a deep breath and answered. "Stephanie," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "My job," I replied calmly. "As the financial manager for your business, it's my responsibility to secure accounts when irregularities are detected. I've documented everything in the report that was sent to you. This isn't about business and you know it, he snapped. This is about Christmas, isn't it? You're throwing a tantrum because Barbara thought it would be better if you didn't come this year. The casualness with which he confirmed their exclusion stung, but I kept my voice professional. This is absolutely about business. I've documented numerous instances of personal use of business funds without proper accounting, unauthorized transfers, and potential tax implications that could put the business at risk. As the financial manager of record, I would be professionally liable if these practices continued unchecked. There was a pause. I could almost hear him recalibrating, realizing this wasn't going to be as simple as bullying or dismissing me. What do you want? He finally asked. I want to do my job correctly, I said. Which means proper separation of business and personal finances, documentation of all transactions, and adherence to the security protocols I've implemented. And when will the accounts be unfrozen? When the irregularities have been addressed and proper controls are in place to prevent future misuse. I've outlined everything in the report. This is ridiculous, he said, his voice rising again. I need access to those funds. For what purpose? I asked. The payroll is already approved, as are all legitimate business expenses. If you need access to personal funds, your personal accounts should be sufficient. Unless, of course, you've been relying on business funds for personal use, which is exactly the problem I've documented. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. We need to discuss this in person, he finally said. Come to the house tomorrow morning. I'll meet you at your office, I countered. This is a business matter after all. He agreed reluctantly and we set a time. As I hung up, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. For once, I had the upper hand in my relationship with my family, but it was a hollow victory. It shouldn't have come to this. The next morning, I arrived at my father's office, armed with 3 copies of my financial report, my laptop, and a clear set of conditions. I had barely slept running through various scenarios in my mind, but I was determined to remain professional and focused. I wasn't surprised to find not just my father waiting but Barbara and Ethan as well. What did surprise me was the presence of Natalie looking uncomfortable and out of place. Barbara must have brought her as some sort of emotional leverage. Let's cut to the chase, my father said as soon as I sat down. You've made your point. Now unfreeze the accounts. I haven't made any point, I replied calmly, opening my laptop. I've implemented necessary financial controls after discovering serious irregularities. Let me show you what I found. I connected my laptop to the office projector and began methodically outlining what I had discovered: the unauthorized transfers, the personal expenses coded as business, the tax implications, the potential liability. As the evidence mounted on the screen before them, I could see their expressions changing. My father's anger slowly transformed into concern. Barbara's indignation wavered, revealing flashes of panic. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat while Natalie looked increasingly horrified. These are simple accounting errors, Barbara interjected when I paused. Nothing malicious. Certainly nothing that justifies freezing all access. Accounting errors that have been happening systematically for years, I questioned. Always just under the notification threshold, always benefiting personal accounts rather than business ones. That's not error, Barbara. That's pattern. You're blowing this out of proportion, my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. I pulled up the documentation of their planned Christmas expenditures. $15,000 earmarked for client appreciation that actually covers reservations at Le Ciel shopping at Nordstrom and a weekend at the Lakeside Resort for 4 people, none of whom are clients. Natalie's eyes widened at this and she shot a look at Ethan, who avoided her gaze. Interesting. So she hadn't known about all of this. That's a business expense, Barbara insisted. Networking. With whom? I challenged. The reservation is for December 27th. The resort is fully booked. There's no room for clients to join you." Barbara's face flushed with anger, but before she could respond, my father cut in. "Enough. What do we need to do to resolve this?" I closed my laptop and looked him directly in the eyes. Full separation of business and personal finances. Repayment of all improperly used business funds. Formal acknowledgement of my authority as financial manager, or termination of my services with full transition to another advisor at market rates. And a binding agreement about future financial management that includes regular audits. "This is extortion," Barbara hissed. "This is business," I corrected her. "And it should have been handled this way from the beginning." "We can't repay everything immediately," my father said, ignoring Barbara's outburst. "Some of those transactions go back years." "I'm aware. That's why I've prepared a repayment schedule that won't impact your personal financial stability, but will rectify the situation over time." I handed out copies of my proposed agreement. As they read through it, the room fell silent except for the occasional sharp intake of breath from Barbara. "And what about Christmas?" Ethan finally asked. "Is this your way of forcing us to include you?" The question hung in the air. It would have been easy to say yes, to use this leverage to force my way back into a family that had made it clear they didn't want me, but that wasn't the point anymore. "Christmas has nothing to do with this," I said finally. "Madison and I have made other plans. This is about business, not family." "So you're holding our accounts hostage just because you can?" Barbara demanded. "I'm protecting business assets from misuse, as is my professional responsibility. The fact that you see proper financial management as hostage-taking is exactly the problem." The meeting continued for another hour with detailed discussions of each point in my agreement. My father grew increasingly subdued as he realized the extent of the financial irregularities and their potential consequences. Ethan alternated between defensiveness and guilt, especially when the $50,000 transfer to help Natalie's business came up. And through it all, Barbara's fury simmered. I could see in her eyes that she recognized this for what it was, a shift in power. For 20 years, she had controlled the family narrative. She had decided who was included and who wasn't. Now, for the first time, she wasn't in control. As the meeting wound down, my father sighed heavily. "I'll need to review this with our attorney, but the basic terms seem fair." "Richard," Barbara exclaimed, "you can't be serious." "What choice do we have, Barbara?" He snapped, his frustration finally boiling over. "Stephanie's right about the accounts. We should have kept things separate. And now we need to fix it." As they gathered their copies of the agreement and prepared to leave, Ethan hung back. When the others had left the room, he approached me. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "the Christmas thing wasn't my idea. Barbara told Dad you had already made other plans, that you had said family Christmases were too stressful, and you wanted a break this year." I stared at him in shock. "That's a complete lie. I never said anything like that." He shrugged uncomfortably. "Yeah, well, I figured that out when I saw your reaction to the text. But by then, Barbara had convinced everyone it was for the best. She said you were just going to make everything about you like you always do." "Like I always do," I repeated incredulously. "Ethan, when have I ever made anything about me? I've been financially supporting this family for years while being systematically excluded. How is that making things about me?" He had the grace to look ashamed. "I know. I guess I've always known, but it was easier to go along with Barbara's version of things. She's persuasive. She's manipulative," I corrected him, "and you all let her do it." He nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About all of it." His apology caught me off guard. It was the first time anyone in my family had acknowledged even indirectly the way I'd been treated. "It's worth something," I said finally, "but not enough to fix this. Not yet." As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "You should know that Barbara's been talking about getting Dad to replace you as the financial manager for a while." She's got some cousin who's an accountant or something. So my suspicions had been correct. They had been planning to cut me out professionally as well as personally. Thanks for telling me, I said. After everyone left, I sat alone in my father's office feeling strangely hollow. I had won this round, but at what cost? The fragile threads that had connected me to my family were now irreparably damaged. And yet, as I gathered my things to leave, I felt something else too. A weight had been lifted. The desperate need for approval that had driven me for decades was finally beginning to fade. Maybe this wasn't an ending so much as a beginning. A chance to build a life and traditions for Madison and me that weren't tainted by constant rejection and manipulation. On the drive home, my phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected source, Natalie. I had no idea about any of this, it read. I never would have taken that money if I'd known where it came from. I'm so sorry. At least someone was. 3 days later, we reconvened at my father's office, this time with their attorney present. I brought Ashley as both a professional witness and moral support. The mood was tense but less hostile than before. Barbara sat rigid in her chair while my father looked tired and drawn. Ethan fidgeted nervously and Natalie had opted not to attend. Their attorney had reviewed my documentation and, to Barbara's visible frustration, had confirmed that my actions were legally sound. We spent the first hour going through the formal agreement I had prepared, making minor adjustments that didn't affect the core requirements: repayment of misused funds, separation of business and personal finances, and either formalization of my role or proper transition to another advisor. As we worked through the details, an unexpected shift began to occur. The conversation moved beyond the immediate financial issues to the underlying family dynamics that had created them. I still don't understand why you felt the need to go to such extremes, my father said during a break when it was just the two of us in the room. If you had concerns about the accounts, you could have just talked to me. I tried, Dad, for years. But you never listened. You always took Barbara's side, always dismissed my concerns. That's not true, he protested automatically, but then paused. Is it? When was the last time you stood up for me against Barbara? When was the last time you acknowledged anything I've done for this family, or this business? He didn't answer immediately, his brow furrowed in thought. I never meant to make you feel excluded, he finally said. After your mother died, things were hard. Barbara made everything easier. She took care of the details, the social calendar, the family connections. She took care of everything except me, I pointed out. And you let her. He rubbed his face wearily. Maybe I did. It was easier to go along with her than to challenge her. But Stephanie, I never stopped loving you. You're my daughter. Am I? Because that text message said pretty clearly that I'm not welcome in this family. I never agreed to that message, he said, his voice suddenly sharp. Barbara sent that without discussing it with me. She told me afterward that she'd handled it because I was too soft to do what needed to be done. This revelation hit me like a physical blow. So you didn't know she was going to uninvite me from Christmas? No, he admitted. She told me you had already said you didn't want to come, that you had other plans. That you thought family Christmases were too stressful. The same lie she had told Ethan. Hearing it confirmed by my father made me feel slightly nauseated. Dad, I never said anything like that. Madison and I were looking forward to Christmas with the family. She made a bracelet for Barbara, for God's sake. He looked stricken. I didn't know, Barbara said. Barbara says a lot of things, I interrupted. And you believe her over everyone else. Before he could respond, the door opened and the others returned. But something had shifted between us. For the first time in decades, I felt like my father was actually seeing me, not just the version of me that Barbara had constructed. As we resumed our discussion, my father was noticeably more assertive, questioning some of Barbara's statements and backing me up on several points. Her face grew increasingly pinched as she realized she was losing control of the narrative. The breaking point came when we discussed the Christmas plans. Since Stephanie chose not to join us this year, Barbara began. I didn't choose anything, I cut in. You explicitly uninvited me via text message, claiming everyone had agreed to it. That's not how I remember it, Barbara said smoothly. You had mentioned wanting a break from family obligations. I have the text message, Barbara, I said, pulling out my phone. Would you like me to read it out loud? That won't be necessary, my father interjected. I'd like to see it though. I handed him my phone, opened to the family group chat. He read it, his face darkening. Richard, Ethan, Natalie and I have discussed it, and we all agreed you're not welcome at Christmas this year, he read aloud. It's better for everyone this way. We'll arrange to see Madison another time. He looked up, his expression thunderous. Barbara, I never agreed to this. Neither did Ethan, from the look on his face. Ethan was staring at Barbara in shock. You told me Stephanie had already said she didn't want to come, that this was just confirming it. Barbara's composure finally cracked. Oh, please. As if any of you would have had the spine to do what needed to be done. Stephanie has always made everything about her. Always playing the victim, always making demands. Christmas should be about family. I am family, I said quietly. I'm Dad's daughter. Madison is his granddaughter. You stopped being family when you decided to use those accounts against us, Barbara snapped. No, Barbara, my father said, his voice firm. Stephanie acted professionally to address genuine financial concerns. Concerns that my attorney confirms are valid. You acted behind my back to exclude my daughter from Christmas, and you lied to me about it. The silence that followed was deafening. Barbara looked from my father to Ethan, clearly expecting one of them to back her up. When neither did, her expression hardened. Fine, take her side. But don't come crying to me when she ruins Christmas like she ruins everything else. When have I ever ruined Christmas? I asked, genuinely bewildered. I've spent the last 20 years trying to be included in this family, bringing thoughtful gifts, helping with meals, managing finances. What exactly have I ruined? You ruined this family the day your mother died, Barbara hissed. Richard was supposed to focus on me, on us, on our new beginning. Instead, he was always worried about poor little Stephanie, so traumatized by her mother's death. Well, guess what? Everyone loses their mother eventually. You're not special. The venom in her voice silenced the room. My father stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. Even Ashley, who had maintained professional detachment throughout, looked shocked. I think, my father said slowly, we need to take a break. Barbara, I'd like to speak with you privately. They left the room, and I sat there trying to process what had just happened. The mask had finally slipped. After 20 years, Barbara had revealed her true feelings, the resentment that had fueled her systematic campaign to exclude me. Ethan moved to sit beside me. I had no idea, he said quietly. I mean, I knew she wasn't always nice to you, but I never realized that she essentially hated me from day one. I finished for him. Yeah, well, that makes two of us. When my father and Barbara returned, the dynamic had shifted dramatically. Barbara sat silently, her face a mask, while my father took control of the discussion. We're going to sign this agreement, he said firmly. And then we're going to make some changes in how this family operates. Starting with Christmas. What about Christmas? Ethan asked. I'm uninviting Barbara from our Christmas celebration, my father said, his voice level but determined. Since she took it upon herself to uninvite my daughter without my knowledge or consent, she can experience what that feels like. Barbara's face went white. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious, he replied. You've been manipulating this family for years, Barbara. Setting my children against each other, controlling who's included and who isn't. It stops now. As the meeting concluded with signatures on the agreement, Barbara stormed out, slamming the door behind her. My father sighed heavily. I owe you an apology, Stephanie. A big one. I've been blind to what's been happening, and I've let you be hurt repeatedly as a result. It's not entirely your fault, I said, surprised by my own willingness to extend grace. Barbara is persuasive, like Ethan said, and I could have been more direct about how I was feeling over the years. Still, he insisted I should have seen it. I should have protected you. I'm your father. As we left the office, arrangements were made for another meeting to discuss the personal side of things. The business matters had been resolved, but the family issues would take more time. Still, for the first time in decades, I felt a glimmer of hope that genuine healing might be possible. On the drive home, Ashley looked over at me. "You okay?" I considered the question carefully. "Not yet," I said honestly. "But I think I might be eventually." The week that followed was a blur of meetings, discussions, and revelations. With the business agreement in place, we turned our attention to the more complex task of addressing the family dysfunction that had led to this point. My father insisted on meeting with me alone, first in a coffee shop, neutral ground, away from both our homes. He arrived looking tired but resolute, carrying a thick folder. "I've been going through old emails and messages," he said after we'd settled with our coffees, "trying to understand how things got so distorted. And I found something I think you should see." He pulled out a stack of printed emails, all correspondence between him and me over the years. Except some of them weren't familiar. "I never wrote that," I said, pointing to an email where I had apparently told him I was too busy to attend his birthday dinner. "Dad, this isn't from me." He nodded grimly. "I know that now. I've found dozens of messages supposedly from you that I now realize were fabricated. And genuine messages from you that I never received because they were intercepted." "Barbara," I breathed, the pieces falling into place. "She had access to your emails. And apparently to your old email account password. She's been filtering our communications for years, Stephanie, creating misunderstandings, making me think you were distant or disinterested when you weren't." The revelation was both shocking and in a strange way validating. All those times I'd thought my father was ignoring my attempts to connect all those invitations that had supposedly never been extended or accepted. They hadn't been my imagination. "There's more," he continued. "I spoke with Ethan at length. Barbara has been doing the same thing with him, telling him you said things about him that you never did, creating artificial competition between you two." I thought of all the years of tension with my brother, the sense that we were always vying for our father's attention and approval. How much of that had been engineered by Barbara? "What about Madison?" I asked suddenly, a horrible thought occurring to me. "All those times you supposedly couldn't make it to her school events, or when invitations for her to visit were rescinded last minute." My father's face crumpled. "I never knew about most of those events, Stephanie. And I never rescinded any invitation to Madison, ever." The depth of Barbara's manipulation was staggering. She hadn't just driven a wedge between my father and me. She had robbed Madison of a relationship with her grandfather, and him of precious years with his granddaughter. "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends partly on you," he admitted. "I've asked Barbara to move out temporarily while we sort things through. I can't be with someone who would deliberately hurt my family this way. But I also know that fixing my relationship with you won't be as simple as removing Barbara from the equation. I've failed you as a father, Stephanie. For years." "You were manipulated," I pointed out. "Yes, but I also chose the path of least resistance. It was easier to believe Barbara's version of events than to question why my daughter seemed so distant. I should have tried harder." In that moment, I saw my father clearly, for perhaps the first time in my adult life, not as the distant authority figure I'd been seeking approval from, but as a flawed human who had made mistakes but was trying to make amends. "I'd like to try to rebuild," I said finally, "not just for my sake or even for yours, but for Madison. She deserves to know her grandfather." The relief on his face was palpable. "Thank you. I don't deserve another chance, but I promise I won't waste it." Over the next several days, we had similar conversations with Ethan, and eventually with extended family members who had been fed Barbara's version of events for years. The picture that emerged was of a systematic campaign to isolate me from my family, driven by Barbara's deep-seated resentment and insecurity. Ethan and I had our own difficult conversation, acknowledging the years of artificial competition and misunderstandings between us. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of tension as we confronted painful truths, but by the end we had reached a new understanding. Not quite a close sibling bond yet, but the foundation for one. The business side of things proceeded more smoothly. With my father's full support, I implemented proper financial controls and separation of accounts. The repayment plan for the misused funds was formalized, and regular audits were scheduled to ensure ongoing compliance. A week before Christmas, my father called to ask if Madison and I would reconsider our plans. "I know you've probably arranged something else," he said, "and I would understand completely if you don't want to come. But I'd really like to have both of you here for Christmas." "No, Barbara, just family." I hesitated. The cabin I'd booked for Madison and me was non-refundable, and she had been excited about our snow adventure. "Could we do both?" I suggested. "Christmas Eve with you, and then head to the mountains Christmas morning. That way Madison gets time with her grandfather and still gets her snow experience." "That sounds perfect," he agreed readily. "And maybe I could join you in the mountains for a day after Christmas, if there's room at your cabin. I've never taken Madison sledding, and I think it's time I started being a proper grandfather." The tentative hope in his voice tugged at my heart. "There's room," I said. "And Madison would love that." As Christmas Eve approached, I felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. So much had changed so quickly. The family dynamic I'd known for 20 years had been completely upended. Barbara was temporarily living with her sister, my father was actively working to repair our relationship, and Ethan was making genuine efforts to include me in family matters. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, old habits that needed breaking, trust that needed rebuilding. But for the first time in decades, I felt like I was actually part of the family, not just an outsider looking in. The final piece of resolution came in the form of a formal letter from my father's attorney, officially appointing me as the permanent financial manager for the business, with a proper contract and market rate compensation. It was a professional acknowledgement of my value, something I had never received despite years of service. When I called to thank him, his response surprised me. "It's long overdue, Stephanie. And it's just the beginning of making things right." Christmas Eve morning dawned clear and cold. Madison was up at dawn, too excited to sleep. We had wrapped our gifts the night before, including the bracelet she had made for her grandfather instead of Barbara. I had wavered over whether to bring the expensive gifts I had originally purchased for everyone, eventually deciding to bring only my father's watch. The others could wait until relations were on more solid footing. "Do you think Grandpa will like my bracelet?" Madison asked for the 10th time, as we drove to my father's house. "He'll love it," I assured her. "He'll love anything you make for him. Even more than store things." "Absolutely. Homemade gifts are special because they come with extra love built in." She seemed satisfied with this answer, and went back to singing along with the Christmas music on the radio. I envied her uncomplicated excitement. My own emotions were far more complex, hope tinged with caution, anticipation mixed with lingering hurt. When we pulled into the driveway, my father was waiting on the porch, a Santa hat perched somewhat ridiculously on his head. Madison squealed with delight, and was out of the car almost before I had it in park, running to him, with her arms outstretched. He scooped her up in a bear hug, his face alight with genuine joy. "There's my girl, I've missed you so much." "I missed you too, Grandpa. Mom says we can stay until tomorrow morning, and then we're going to the mountains for snow." "That's right," he agreed, setting her down and giving me a somewhat hesitant smile. "And I might come visit you there too if that's okay with you." "Yes," Madison cheered. "You can help us build a snowman." As we entered the house, I was struck by the changes. The formal museum-like quality that Barbara had always insisted upon was gone. In its place was a warmer, more casual atmosphere. The perfectly coordinated designer decorations had been replaced with older, more personal ornaments, including, I realized with a start, several that had belonged to my mother. I found them in the attic, my father explained, seeing me notice. Barbara had packed them away years ago. I thought it was time to bring them out again. Ethan arrived shortly after without Natalie. We decided it was better to have just family this year, he explained. Start fresh, you know, Natalie understood. She's having Christmas with her parents. The day unfolded with a warmth and ease I hadn't experienced in a family setting since my mother died. We made cookies, played board games, and watched Christmas movies. Madison was in heaven, soaking up the attention from her grandfather and uncle. There were still awkward moments, old patterns that tried to reassert themselves, but we navigated them with newfound awareness. After Madison went to bed excited for Santa and our mountain adventure the next day, the three of us sat in the living room with glasses of eggnog. I want to thank you both, my father said seriously, for giving me another chance. I know I don't deserve it. Everyone deserves a second chance, Dad, I said, especially family. Not everyone, he replied. Barbara and I are filing for divorce. I've tried to understand her actions to find some explanation that would make it possible to move forward, but the deliberate nature of what she did. The years of manipulation, I can't get past it. I felt a complex mixture of emotions at this news. Relief certainly, but also a strange sadness for my father. Despite everything, he had loved Barbara for 20 years. Are you sure? Ethan asked. Maybe with counseling. My father shook his head firmly. Some betrayals can't be overcome. What she did to Stephanie, to Madison, to our family, it was calculated and sustained over decades. That's not something therapy can fix. I reached over and squeezed his hand. I'm sorry, Dad. I know this is hard for you. Losing Barbara is hard, he acknowledged. But nearly losing you and Madison was harder. I won't make that mistake again. The next morning, Madison woke us all up at an ungodly hour to open presents. Her delight at the gifts was contagious, but the real moment came when she gave my father the bracelet she had made. I made it for you, Grandpa. See, it has blue beads because Mom says blue is your favorite color, and these special ones that look like tools because you build things. My father's eyes filled with tears as he slipped the slightly crooked bracelet onto his wrist. It's the most beautiful bracelet I've ever seen, Madison. I'm going to wear it every day. Promise? She asked seriously. I promise, he replied, equally serious. And you know what else I promise? That I'm going to be the best grandfather from now on. No more missed school plays or birthdays. I'm going to be there for everything I can. Pinky swear, she held out her tiny finger. Pinky swear. He linked his finger with hers, and in that small gesture I saw the beginning of healing. After breakfast we packed up for our mountain trip. My father helped load the car, confirming plans to join us the following day. Stephanie, he said, as Madison climbed into the car, I can't change the past 20 years, but I can promise you the next 20 will be different. That's all I ever wanted, Dad, I replied honestly. Just to be part of the family. You always were, he said firmly, even when I was too blind to show it. You're my daughter, and nothing and no one will ever come between us again. As Madison and I drove toward our mountain adventure, I felt lighter than I had in years. The financial freeze that had started as an act of self-protection had become the catalyst for long overdue family healing. The road ahead wouldn't be perfectly smooth. There would be missteps and old wounds that would take time to fully heal. Barbara's influence couldn't be erased overnight, and years of dysfunctional patterns wouldn't disappear immediately. But for the first time in decades, we were a family working together toward something better, bound by love and a commitment to truth, rather than manipulation and exclusion. And that perhaps was the best Christmas gift of all. You know, family relationships can be incredibly complicated, especially when money gets involved. I'd love to hear if any of you have experienced financial manipulation in your families and how you handled it. Did you have to take a stand like I did, or find another way through? Drop your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you. I'll be sharing more about our journey of family healing in future videos, including how my father and I rebuilt our relationship from the ground up. It's been a challenging road, but one worth traveling. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones that lead to the greatest healing.